Welcome back to Kiki's Customs and welcome back to the Mercedes SL500 project. Bro, where's the engine?
They stole your shit, bro.
Alright, so this Mercedes project has been going on for about like 6 months, right? Me and Leo, we pulled the engine out. I sent off the bell housing to XF Motorsports so they can make a billet aluminum part that'll fit a CD009 transmission to the original engine. He finally sent the part back after what, 4 months or something?
Like a year?
Almost a year. So that's why you haven't seen anything of this on the channel yet, but the part is here. This is the part that we've been waiting on for so long. Boom. So we have it test fitted right now. Already made some adjustments. I had to make some room for the starter. But basically what this part is, if you've seen a CD009 transmission hooked up to an LS, it's the same thing. So it's an adapter plate, right? We have one part that bolts onto Nissan transmission. This is out of a 2003 350Z 6-speed. It bolts onto here, this plate. Then we have another part that bolts onto this engine. And then what it does, these holes underneath, right, those are also bolts. Those will bolt up to here. So I want to show you guys a step-by-step process of putting, say, the clutch pedal in this SL500 all the way up to bolting this thing together and getting it to run. That way, if you guys want to do this to your SL500, your R129, you will know how to do this because nobody's ever done this before. If you guys are interested, hit up XF Motorsports. I'll link them in the description. But I say that's enough talking. Let's get into what I've been doing. All right, so here we go. Let me show you what XF Motorsports sent me, and then I show you what you need to buy and what you have to do to the engine to make all this fit. Okay, so we have our engine adapter plate. So this side goes to the engine. This side will go to the 350Z transmission, the CD009. And then we have the Flywheel adapter plate. I'll explain how that works after. He also sent me these bolts, which will hold the 350Z flywheel onto the engine. And these bolts will hold on the adapter plate to the engine. Also, what I had to buy is a 350Z or G35 manual clutch and flywheel. So we have the flywheel here, straight from eBay, best parts ever. We also got a 6-puck clutch with no springs on it, so that's gonna jerk a lot. And it also came with the pressure plate, you know, race car red for speed. All right, and the prices, if you guys are interested in the prices, the adapter plate, he made it for me and sent it down, shipped it for roughly $1,300. The clutch and flywheel is a cheap one from eBay that cost me about $300 for all of that, the pressure plate, the flywheel, and the clutch. So those are the main pieces. For the bolts to hold everything together, when you take apart your M119 engine from the Mercedes, you want to keep all of the transmission bolts because you're going to use that to bolt that part up to here. And for the 350Z transmission, you don't need to take the bolts if you pull it off of the car. Anyways, I went to Home Depot, bought some high quality bolts. Maybe not the highest quality you could get, but they are grade 5, which should be fine. If you do buy this, you will have all of the measurements for the bolts and all that. All right, so now that you know what you need, I'm gonna show you what you have to do. So from the factory, the way this engine flywheel is bolted on, you have 8 of these bolts. You take this out, right? Don't need those bolts anymore. There's gonna be a spacer on the front. You won't need this one. You have your flywheel. You wanna keep this and make sure you don't break it. And then there's another spacer here. You're gonna wanna keep this spacer. So the way this thing is gonna bolt up, spacer is on here. This is a good time to change your rear main seal if it's leaking or whatever. This one's fine. Your flywheel goes on, and then this adapter plate will go on. There's a little hole which will go onto this dowel, so you want to make sure that lines up correctly. And basically then you bolt it up with these. But before we tighten this thing down, we have to do one thing. We have to get some bolts to hold this ring on the flex plate because this is meant for automatic transmission. The torque converter bolts into these, and now that those bolts aren't there, the only thing holding this on is this pressed dowel, which will over time wear out and it might fall apart. So we need some bolts for these. now that we got the bolts on there, make sure the washer's on there. Gonna put this flywheel on there. And now we're gonna start putting this adapter plate on there. So now we're gonna use these, I think they're E14 bolts, if I'm not mistaken. All right, so now that is on, we're gonna torque these down to 60 foot-pounds. But first we're gonna torque these down to 40 foot-pounds all the way around and then go down to 60. All right, 40 foot-pounds, and go down to 60. All right, it's on there. Now just give those a quick torque mark so you know that they've been torqued, and you could see where if one of these bolts comes loose, you know how far and which one. Alright, so now we're just gonna throw this on here. It does not matter what orientation because this is just gonna be a clutch plate. Just a little bit of Loctite and throw these things in there. There's a little bit of play in this. I think it'll be fine. That feels stripped, cool. That also feels stripped, cool. Okay, so I didn't like how much play was in this flywheel, plus we have 2 bolts that are stripped out. So what I'm gonna do is take this adapter plate off, drill out the holes, rethread them with coarser threads, and I'm gonna use bigger bolts so there's no more play. Let's get that. That's a lot of play. So now that we got this rethreaded with some bigger bolts, I'm gonna throw this back on and torque it down again. Alright, so now we gotta figure out this placement on this crank position sensor because this won't fit on with the adapter plates. So the most important thing with this is getting it this position correct. The rotation of it matters more because that tells the computer where the crank is because this flywheel is connected to the crank. 1.4 millimeters away from the flywheel. Then we're gonna need to center the hole about 38.5 millimeters away from the transmission face, whatever you call it. So now we're gonna put the adapter plates on. I already made some modifications to make this fit on here. Basically, I had to cut these bolts down, and I'm also gonna have to drill out some of this because this top bolt hits that when you put the trans together with it. Other than that, fits pretty well. And we have the transmission side. Alright, so I'm gonna have to drill into some of the transmission. Alright, so the last thing we gotta do for this crank position is drill and tap a hole right there. I'm gonna do that real quick, and then we're gonna take this off, trim this part right here because this bolt going through here hits this piece on the engine. And then we're gonna tighten up this mounting plate. We take this off, put it on the trans, put that together. And we're gonna put the 350Z flywheel, put that on, put the clutch, put the pressure plate, and then mate them together. Alright, so we just ground down this part. You'll see why exactly after, but that is done. These bottom bolts go at the bottom right here, the 4. And we have 2 nuts here that go here. These are the ones that I had to cut down, they're studs. And then we also have 2 bolts that will go right here. So just so you know, this little pokey thing sticks out this way. If you put it the other way, it'll strip off these because it's not connecting fully. Stick that in there. Alright, so now we're gonna put this adapter plate on the CD009. Basically, we got a bolt in the back up here, and then there's gonna be 3 bolts underneath here. Alright, so we're going to throw the starter on. We have some different bolts. We're not going to use the same starter bolts, but there is this big shim that goes in first. And we have this smaller shim that is also going to go on. And then now we put the starter on. It's gonna work? I have no idea. And then here is the crank position sensor connected. Okay, motor mount's going back in. I did a whole video on this and how I made this. This is polyurethane from, say, Lowe's, right? Took out all the hydraulic fluid that was in the bottom of this thing and drilled it out, refilled it with polyurethane, so it's basically a polyurethane race mount. But yeah, if you want a stiffer mount, all you got to do is take out the original rubber and whatever's inside the original motor mount, and then basically refill it with polyurethane from Lowe's. Anyways, motor mount, heat shield, go right here. That is pretty much ready to go into the car now. So let's get that.